With all due permission of the esteemed panel, do we have your permission to start the webinar? Lavleen ma'am, Sapandi sir, guest of honor Justice P.S. Narayana sir, and worthy principal, Riyadh College
Yes.
of Law.
Yes.
Yes. Now I request Mannat, our organizing member, to kindly introduce the speakers to all the attendees. Mannat, kindly start.
A very good evening to all the dignitaries, all the principals, lawyers, professors, and all other attendees joining us from different colleges. I am Mannat, organizing member of Riyadh College of Law Virtual Edition 8.0. Welcome you all to this enriching session on the topic FIR, Putting Criminal Enforcement Machinery in Motion. The dignitaries who took out their valuable time and blessed us with their presence are Honorable Justice P.S. Narayana Sir, Advocate Amarjeet Kaur Khurana Ma'am, Advocate Sapan Dheer Sir, and Advocate Lavleen Taliwal Singla Ma'am. I should take this liberty to introduce our honorable dignitaries to all our attendees. Honorable Justice P.S. Narayana Sir enrolled as an advocate on 10th October 1973. Originally on the rolls of Bar Council of Madras, Sir had the privilege of working as a junior advocate in the chamber of Sri Balamuri Radhakrishna and Sri Madan Bhushni Krishna Swami, the two leading advocates of Tirupati Bar Council of India. Sir had, Sir had commenced his practice as an independent professional and commanded a good volume of work in all branches of law like constitution, civil, and criminal. He has also been an income tax assessee for the last 5 years. Sir was also a panel advocate of Andhra Pradesh High Court Legal Services Committee. Apart from this, Sir has also worked as a chief editor of Andhra Weekly Reporters and Andhra Law Times for some time. He was also an honorary editor of Andhra Law Times till recently. Sir was elevated as additional judge of High Court of Andhra Pradesh and sworn on 25th June 2001. He retired in the year 2010. Sir had also written 100 books during his tenureship as judge of Hyderabad High Court, and his best-selling books are Law of Writs and Hindu Succession Act. Currently, he is the member of Mahagai Water Tribunal. Welcome, sir. We are grateful to have you. Advocate Amarjeet Kaur Khurana Ma'am is a practicing lawyer at Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court for the last 25 years. She has been also served as Additional Advocate General Punjab, currently serving as Deputy Advocate General of Punjab. She is also a mediator at Mediation Center at Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court. Welcome, ma'am. We are pleased to have you. Advocate Sapan Dheer Sir has been practicing in the Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court for the last 20 years. Sir has dealt with various cases, civil, criminal, tax, service, environmental, education matters, as well as arbitration cases. Sir has also been a vice president of Punjab and Haryana Bar Association during 2012 and 13. Sir has been a trained mediator at Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court. Welcome, sir. We are honored to have you. Advocate Lavleen Taliwal Singla Ma'am is a practicing advocate in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, Chandigarh. She has also been earlier served as Senior Deputy Advocate General of the state of Haryana. Apart from practicing law, Ma'am is also serving as mediator in the Mediation and Conciliation Center at Punjab and Haryana High Court. She is also the founding members of Young Lawyers Association of High Court, which brings together young advocates of High Court to interact with the seniors for various topics to improve the knowledge and polish their advocacy skills. Welcome, ma'am. We are grateful to have you. Now, I request our worthy principal, Dr. Monica Sharma, ma'am, to welcome our dignitaries.
Thank you, Mannat. Good evening, everyone. Hope you all are good and safe. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Honorable Mr. Justice P.S. Narayana ji, Madam Amarjeet Kaur Khurana, Deputy Advocate General Punjab, Mr. Sapan Dheer, Advocate, Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court, Madam Lavleen Dhaliwal, Advocate, Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court, on behalf of management, faculty, staff, and students of Riaz College of Law on the webinar 8.0 on the topic FIR, putting criminal enforcement machinery in motion. I am hopeful that your talk will be very beneficial and fruitful to all of us. I also want to welcome all the attendees from various parts of India. Thank you everyone for joining us. I would also like to welcome our media and knowledge partners. Thank you. Over to Mannat.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Pratibha to coordinate within the session.
I'd like to say so beginning with the session, I would like to request Honorable Mr. Justice E.S. Narayana sir to inaugurate the session and grace us with his presence and articulate knowledge.
Fine. A fine evening to all of you. I observe a distinguished panel. Maybe several of them are representing Punjab and Haryana High Courts. Incidentally, even in introduction, I may refer to Justice P.V. Sanjay Kumar, now a sitting judge of High Court of Punjab and Haryana, who was appearing before me continuously as standing counsel of certain corporations and had been in a way closely associated with me as well. The reasons may be many. I am not inclined to go into that topic at this stage. Whatever it is, the topic of the day chosen by the organizers is an interesting and a fundamental topic concerned with the criminal procedure and criminal jurisprudence. The importance of the first information report need not be overemphasized. We quite often refer to the procedural law and the substantial law. Section 154 of the Code of Criminal Procedure falls under the procedural law. First information reports, popularly known as FIR, is the first fundamental step in relation to criminal investigation. First information report, whether a particular piece of intimation or information given to the station house officer, whichever name he is assigned with, depending upon the police administration of the different states. That is the first important step may be concerned with cognizable offenses. Here again, these are all no doubt fundamentals. We may have to draw a distinction between what is cognizable offense and what is non-cognizable offense. The definitions are available. And what offenses are cognizable and what offenses are non-cognizable. What offenses are bailable and what offenses are non-bailable. These are all certain of the aspects which we quite often deal with. Whenever an information is given relating to the commission of a cognizable offense, the concerned station house officer is duty bound to register the crime and further proceed with the investigation. So, the registration of the first information report is the first step in the commencement of the investigation by the investigating agency. Here again, relating to procedure, we quite often talk about the procedure to be followed in this regard, governed by the Code of Criminal Procedure. These are all concerned with ordinary criminal courts. There are certain courts, special courts, or special procedure, slight deviation from the normal procedure, though substantially the procedure, as far as those courts are concerned, also they are governed by the Code of Criminal Procedure. Some additional aspects would be introduced. Maybe a few of central legislations are there. Several of the state legislations governing the respective states as well, they are also there. Where certain additional provisions will be there. Certain provisions of the Code of Criminal Procedure as such, though are made applicable, the slight procedural deviation, it shows that those courts are governed by that procedure and there is some procedural deviation. Substantially, these are the aspects which may have to be gone into in the context of the first information report. Unfortunately, several of the investigating agencies, despite the academies giving a lot of training, and despite the fact that they are expected to know the law, there are several lapses which are being committed in this arena. The courts have been quite often very, very critical, making very serious observations in this regard. In fact, the Apex Court, on more than one occasion, had warned and also guided and made certain observations relating to the need of certain of the police reforms to be introduced. Certain measures had been taken, but in my opinion, a lot further to be done in this arena. Suffice that with this introduction, now I shift to the actual topic, the first information report as such. What is first information report? Whether every piece of information or intimation given relating to the commission of the offense, in particular, a cognizable offense, it constitutes FIR, or what actually is the FIR? Controversial question quite often falls for consideration before the criminal courts. The importance being when even vague or cryptic information, if it is to be taken as first information report, at certain times, there will be certain difficulties. Suppose it is not treated as the first information report, there are certain problems. The actual problem is if any piece of intimation or information to be treated as the first information report, then the subsequent statement, if any, with slight elaboration and with certain details as well, it would be hit by section 162 CRPC. That's exactly where the criminal courts would be placed in a dilemma when elaborate arguments would be advanced by the counsel representing the prosecution and the defense as well to decide whether a mere piece of information on the ground that it was first in point of time to be treated as FIR or not. This controversy had been answered in several of the decided cases. I am not inclined to refer to the decisions since the topic is an elaborate one. The next important aspect which would be considered is the question of delay. Delay in giving the first information. Whether delay as such is fatal for the story of the prosecution, whether the prosecution to fail on the ground alone, this aspect would depend upon the facts and circumstances of a particular given case, especially in the background of the nature of offenses with which the accused have been charged with. In this context, I may refer to only one important aspect. Since the delay caused in the very giving of the first information report and subsequently in the dispatch and all that, there may be several reasons. As far as the sexual offenses are concerned, maybe the rape and outraging modesty of women and all that. There are several decisions where the delay in reporting the matter had not been taken serious note of for several reasons. After all, we are living in this society. We know why the girl or woman affected, having grievance. The family members and others concerned with her may not be initially interested as well. And subsequently, after some delay, they may choose to approach the concerned station house officer. There are several decided cases on those lines by different courts in the country. I am giving this only as a typical example. If properly explained, cannot weaken the strength of the story of the prosecution. This is the principle which had been broadly laid down in several of the decided cases. And hence, broadly speaking, we can lay down a fundamental principle in the context of the concept of delay vis-a-vis the first information report. Each of the case may have to be decided depending upon the facts and circumstances of a particular given case. Here again, the question of exercise of judicial discretion by the concerned judicial officer is an important area where the judicial officers are expected to apply their minds properly to the facts of a particular given case and to decide whether the delay in FIR had been properly explained by the prosecution, whether such an explanation is worthy of consideration, whether it should be in favor of the accused in giving the benefit of doubts or not. That is an important aspect to be decided with in every criminal trial. However, there are certain cases where on trivial grounds the acquittals had been recorded. Here, broadly and generally speaking, relating to the criminal administration in the country and administration of the criminal courts, especially the subordinate courts as well, I observe several of the acquittals being recorded on such trivial grounds. No doubt, we are governed by our jurisprudence. It is no doubt true that the accused to be given the benefit of doubt. But there are certain legislations where the burden had been cast on a different footing as well. I need not refer to those legislations and those details as well, because that is an elaborate topic by itself. Be that as it may, what I am saying is, when acquittals had been recorded on these grounds, while sitting on criminal side, I remember in several of the matters, in spite of the recording of acquittal normally not to be disturbed, I in fact interfered, since these are not definitely justifiable grounds in several of the matters where the other evidence available on record is strong enough to establish the guilt of the accused. Hence, what I'm saying is, some of the circumstances what we put under doubting or suspicious circumstances which may have to be read in favor of the accused in the light of our jurisprudence, they are to be very, very carefully analyzed. Let it not be taken that I am a judge in favor of convictions always, not at all. But equally, too many acquittals which are being recorded throughout the country, as the statistics reflect, that is also not in the interest of the general administration or the maintenance of law and order and other problems in general concerned with the society. Yes? I have to continue or?
Apologies, Your Lordship. The other speaker has to also keep their views.
That's why I'm asking.
Please, Your
I can stop here?
Yes, Your Lordship. Yes, sir. From here.
Yes. Okay.
Your Lordship, knowledge was so brief that people started making up the notes, Your Lordship.
Absolutely no problem. Because the topic is a very wide topic.
Yes, please, Your Lordship.
Just I can touch only the fundamentals and.
Yes, Lordship, we can visit you up and we'll have a brief introduction about the topic and then we'll be making notes.
Okay. That's very nice. That's good. Okay.
It was a great opportunity to hear insightful words. Thank you. Now I request our next keynote speaker, Advocate Sapan Dheer sir, to give his input to grace our knowledge. Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Pratibha. Although sir has elaborately explained about this topic, so I'll give my input also a little bit whatsoever I have. See, today's session is actually upon FIR, topic of FIR by putting criminal enforcement machinery in the motion. So first of all, we should know that what is the FIR. FIR is First Information Report. It's the first document prepared in criminal proceedings. FIR is a document which places on record the actual story of the victim side. It acts as a tool on which the police authorities base and start their investigations, etc. FIR in criminal proceedings plays a vital role because this is the first and foremost document whereby the criminal machinery starts with. Now we should know about the importance of the FIR. One must understand to establish the importance of this document. We know the legal perspective also attached to it. Section 154(1) of CRPC, which makes clear that the FIR can be registered only in cognizable offences. Cognizable offences, what are cognizable offences? Cognizable offences are those in which a police officer can arrest the accused also without a warrant even. He or she, the police officer, doesn't need any warrant from the court or from the judicial magistrate in a cognizable offences to arrest a person. He has to act according to the gravity of the nature of the offense. He can arrest without even warrant. So this is the cognizable crime. Its classification about these cognizable and non-cognizable offences are given in CRPC itself in its first schedule attached to it at the bottom. Section 154, everyone is reading CRPC nowadays. Section 154 says that every information relating to the commission of cognizable offence, if given orally to an officer in charge or a police station, shall be reduced into in writing by him or under his direction and be read over to the informant, whosoever gives the information. Every such information, whether given in writing or reduced into writing, shall be signed by that person. Ultimately, its substance shall have to be entered by the police officer in a book to be kept as per the format prescribed in the police station itself. This is section 154(1). And ultimately, after writing into the diary, the police officer has to provide copy of the same to the victim or to the informant. Informant doesn't need to be victim actually. Whosoever is the informant, he or she has to get free copy of this FIR free of cost from the police officer. That section 154(2)(c) CRPC says. Third, in case the police officer refuses to register that FIR, then the person concerned, the informant, what can he do? He or she can go to higher officer, superintendent of police concerned, to apprise him that this police officer, I have given this information to a police station actually, but the police officer there in charge there, he doesn't register my case. And ultimately, if the SP is satisfied, he can get it investigated himself or from some other officer, and ultimately the FIR can be registered. Now we should know that who can lodge that actually FIR. As per section 154 itself, it doesn't need that a victim only can register the FIR or any relative thereof. The act says that anyone can register the FIR, whosoever has information about it. It's not necessary it is victim or eyewitness, anybody can register that. A police officer can lodge also the FIR at its own if he comes to know about the commission of offences. In this regard, so many judgments are there of the Supreme Court. The first foremost judgment when this issue was raised before the Honorable Supreme Court, that is in 1974. The judgment is 1974 4 SCC page 300. The case of Hallu versus State of MP, which says the Supreme Court holds therein that section 154 doesn't require that the report must be given by a person who has personal knowledge of the incident reported. It doesn't need that. The section speaks of information of a cognizable offense only. Then nowadays the most popular judgment is coming from the Supreme Court in 2014, Lalita Kumari's case, which also says that any information is given to the police officer has to register the FIR first. Only then it can be incognizable, of course, on incognizable cases, not in incognizable cases only. It has to be registered and then investigated. Lalita Kumari says, Lalita Kumari is 2014 volume 2 SCC page 1. The next topic I would say that how to lodge the FIR actually. Its process actually is very simple. It's as simple as narrating a story to a police officer. Informant, whosoever is the informant, he has to visit the police station near to the crime scene and furnish all the information which he has pertaining to the commission. And then section 154 gives a choice also to him to furnish that information orally or in writing. If he gives an oral version, then police will write it and ultimately get it signed from that person. Otherwise, he can give in writing also. Nowadays, the online procedure has also started. by the police, and due to Corona as well, everyone sends email nowadays. Email to the police station to give information to the police station. Then this is the procedure as to how we can lodge the FIR to the police station. The next, I would say that how non-cognizable cases to be registered. So cognizable cases is to be registered by the FIR, by the police officer itself in the police station. Whenever informant gives this information to him, ultimately he or she would register. In what is non-cognizable offences? In non-cognizable offences, the section 155(1) is CRPC is there, which says that when an informant approaches the officer in charge, officer enter such information is in his book prescribed, and ultimately he can begin an investigation, but only after receiving an order from the concerned area magistrate. The police officer cannot register FIR in non-cognizable offence without the order of the magistrate. The only power the police has, whenever the informant gives information to a police officer in a non-cognizable offences, he can investigate, but he cannot register straightway the FIR. He has to obtain permission from the magistrate. He has to inform the magistrate that this is my investigation. This is the case where I found that the cognizance is to be taken, and then magistrate orders. Only then the FIR can be registered in those cases. The famous citation is there of Swapan Kumar Guha's case in 1982. The Supreme Court holds this also. 1982-1 SCC, page 561 is the citation, which says that there is no such thing like unfettered discretion in the realm of power defined by the statute. Indeed, unlimited discretion in that sphere can become a ruthless destroyer of personal freedom. And power to investigate into cognizable offences must therefore be exercised strictly on the condition which is granted by the code only. So police can go for investigation only in cognizable offences as per the code itself, not in this non-cognizable cases. In this, another judgment also, which recently has come by the Supreme Court in 2017, it's a state of Telangana versus Habib's case, which Supreme Court says that the non-cognizable matter, the police cannot register FIR. It can make inquiry whenever information received, and then it has to be taken to the magistrate, and magistrate gives the permission of registering that complaint as into an FIR. Then the police officer can get it in the concerned police station, that FIR can be registered there. Now, I would elaborate the little bit the remedies in case the police officer refuses to lodge FIR. It is not illegal. Police officer in certain cases can refuse also. In which cases he can refuse? For example, on a jurisdictional issue. See, I am lodging a complaint to a police officer of an offence happened in Calcutta. I cannot register at Chandigarh. Chandigarh, if I go to Chandigarh police station to register an FIR, and the Chandigarh police will certainly refuse, that is not illegal. So what are the remedies then? The remedies, first of all, in case if it is on the ground of jurisdiction, then the police officers, it's mandatory to the police officer actually under the CRPC, as well as there are certain judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court as well, and which say that in case on the ground of jurisdiction FIR is refused, then it is mandatory for the police officer to record the information first. If somebody gives the information, then that information is to be sent to the concerned police station wherever having the proper jurisdiction. Mr. Saksham is calling on my mobile. Is there any problem?
Sir, kindly conclude it, sir, since the other speaker has to.
Just I'll take 2 minutes more.
Please.
Then there are statutory remedies as well, provided under section 154(3), 156(3). Whenever the FIR is refused to be registered, then the person can go to magistrate. Under section 156(3), magistrate can first take cognizance of the offence, ultimately get it registered from the police officer, or it can be investigated also. Then the issue is that one last issue I would say, that can I go judicial remedy? There is judicial remedy also attached to it. If the if the FIR is not given, then what is the alternative remedy? Alternative remedy under 226 also. One can go in writ petition also. But in certain cases, the Supreme Court says that whenever the alternative remedy the person has, then the Article 226 cannot be availed into. That is the judicial remedy actually. We can't pursue judicial remedy before this statutory remedy. Famous cases are Skiri Basu, Alit Padamsi, Sudhir Bhaskar. I'll give the citation to Mr. Saksham at the later stage.
Yes, sir.
Now, in 2010 only, the Supreme Court says in one case I have just gone through, that is 2010 volume 8 SCC 582. It's a state of Maharashtra versus Farooq Ahmed, where the Supreme Court holds that the writ petition under section 226 in such situation can be availed. Then I would now, since time is over, my time is over now, without taking any much more time, I hope that I am able to briefly explain the concept regarding putting criminal machinery on its motion by the FIR, which I think would certainly be helpful to understand these basic concepts relating to an FIR. I thank Rayat College and of Law to accord me this opportunity to give my insights on this subject. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Over to Saksham.
Thank you for sharing your profound knowledge with us. Thank you so much. Moving forward, I would like to request our next dignitary, Advocate Amarjeet Kaur Khurana ma'am, to honor us with her visionary words.
Good evening. I'm thankful to the organizers and Rayat College Law for giving me an opportunity to share my views on this platform. Honorable Lordships has vividly explained each and every aspect on this topic. Adding to it, I'm apprising and discussing with you only the aspect of non-registration of FIR by the police and the remedies available to an aggrieved person. Let me share with you the basic provision, that is section 154 of criminal procedure, which provides that it is the duty of the complainant to submit a complaint orally or in writing with the office in charge of the police station. The police authority shall register an FIR in case the complainant discloses the commission of cognizable offence. But if the local police is not registering the FIR, there is an inbuilt remedy provided in section 154, subsection 3 of the Code of the Criminal Procedure. The complainant shall submit the copy of the complaint to the Superintendent of Police by way of registered post, disclosing the allegations and that no action has been taken by the police authority. Now the question is, in case the Superintendent of Police is not responding to the redressal of such complaint, then I wish to share with you two landmark judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court. The first judgment is of State of Haryana versus Bhajanlal, 1992, Supplementary 1, SCC 335. In this, Honorable Supreme Court has categorically held that it is mandatory for the police to register an FIR if the allegations in the complaint discloses the commission of a cognizable offence, without adverting to the determination of veracity and truthfulness of such allegations. The second judgment is a judgment given by a constitutional bench of the Honorable Supreme Court in Lalita Kumari versus State of Uttar Pradesh. The Honorable Supreme Court has issued the guidelines. I will state the guidelines, relevant guidelines. The registration of FIR is mandatory under section 154 of the code if the information discloses commission of a cognizable offense. The police officer cannot avoid his duty of registering offense if cognizable offense is disclosed. Action must be taken against erring officers who do not register the FIR if information received by him discloses a cognizable offense. The next question is as to where the aggrieved person should approach in case the police authorities have not registered the FIR, especially in view of the law laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court. The accepted statutory and constitutional remedies available are: first, the aggrieved person may file a writ petition under Article 32 and Article 226 of the Constitution of India for mandamus, seeking issuance of directions to police to do their statutory duty. Second, he may file a petition under Section 482 of the Code of Criminal Procedure in the Honorable High Court, seeking directions to police to register an FIR. Third, aggrieved person may file a complaint under Section 156, subsection 3 of the Code of Criminal Procedures in the Court of Judicial Magistrate for direction to the officer in charge of the police station to register an FIR. Fourth, the aggrieved person may file a complaint under Section 200 of the Code of Criminal Procedure in the Court of Judicial Magistrate. Though I may wish to share that regarding the remedies before the Constitutional Court or before the High Court under Section 482 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, the approach of the higher courts is that the aggrieved person should first exhaust all the alternative and effective remedies, such like a complaint under Section 156 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, if still an FIR is not registered or the grievance sustains. Then such aggrieved persons may approach to the higher courts. I may share on this issue the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in Skiri Vasu versus State of Uttar Pradesh, Criminal Appeal number 1685 of 2007, decided on 7th of December 2007. The most important aspect is that, is there any provision in law for taking action against the erring police officials for dereliction of the duty by not registering the FIR? I must say there are provisions like Section 166 and Section 166A of Indian Penal Code. Section 166 and 166A declares such an action of police officials an offense which is punishable up to imprisonment of 2 years without fine or with fine or both. Now I conclude by expecting and wishing that the statutory law as interpreted by Honorable Supreme Court may be followed by police authorities in letter and spirit, and justice shall triumph. I'm really thankful to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for the enlightenment. Thank you so much. Now I request our next panelist, Advocate Loveleen ma'am, to refine us with her knowledge.
Good evening to the distinguished members of the panel, all Madam Principal, the worthy guests here. Your Lordship has already given us such an elaborate detail of what FIR is and what the procedure is, and the worthy dignitaries, Sapan sir, Amarjeet ma'am have already totally covered the topic. So I don't have much to cover. What I will speak about then is I'll elaborate on what zero FIR is. As has already been discussed during this webinar, that it's mandatory for the police authorities to register an FIR in case of commission of a cognizable offense. Zero FIR is a type of FIR that can be filed at any police station, regardless of the place of incidence or jurisdiction. Like Sapan sir was saying, if an offense has been committed in Calcutta and I go to Chandigarh police stating that this cognizable offense has been committed, or there is some kind of a confusion about a jurisdiction of where, which police station's jurisdiction does the place where the crime has been committed comes under. Zero FIR is what has to be registered by the police in that case. Now, this happened after the Nirbhaya case in Delhi. Justice Verma's committee was set up. And that after that, the registration of zero FIR has become mandatory. Uh, the in Once you register, once a cognizable offense, the commission of a cognizable offense is reported to the police, uh, a normal FIR is registered, but it is given the number 0. The police station where the zero FIR is originally registered is supposed to make a basic investigation into the case before passing it on to the other police station, which has its competent jurisdiction. Uh, it is since it is mandatory that the zero FIR has to be registered, this has been done so that there is no delay in registration or in writing down the events that are reported to the police. A lot of time earlier, what was happening was an offense was committed, the victim or the relatives or anyone known to the victim would go to the police station, and there was a fight over under whose jurisdiction, of which police station does it fall, that which police stations should register the FIR. So in this case now, it is mandatory that an FIR is registered at the same time. If it is a cognizable offense, it shall be registered. Zero number is given. A preliminary investigation, a basic investigation is made, and then it is passed on to the other police station, wherever the jurisdiction is made out. Then there is EFIR. EFIR is another topic that has not been covered elaborately. It is a short form of electronic FIR, as you all know. It can be filed in cases of cognizable offenses like rape, murder, dowry, all the offenses. You know the cognizable offenses since all the students are already studying this. The main agenda for EFIR is to protect the identity of such victims who may not be able to file the FIR at the nearby police station for reasons such as society pressure or inability to face the society or some physical disability. It's easier to file an EFIR. Now, all the states have their own different patterns for lodging EFIRs. Emails are also being sent to the police stations for registration of FIR, which is also considered for registration of FIR. So EFIR is another platform where the information of commission of cognizable offences is taken by the police, and it's the FIR is registered, and the criminal the machinery comes into motion in that case. Since most of the topics have already been covered, and I believe there is a question answer round, Saksham, is that what you told me?
Ma'am, mostly questions and answers have been covered so far, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So you can share your personal experience on the...
Oh, yeah. So zero FIR, as I was saying, zero FIR in a lot of cases, though it is mandatory, I would like to elaborate on that. But in economic offenses, as a lawyer, my personal experience is that they do not register the zero FIR, the police authorities. A complaint, especially in economic offenses, when a complaint comes to them, they do their preliminary investigation and then just send the complaint through the DGP to the other state or through the SP to the other district. And zero FIRs are usually not registered in case of economic offenses. That's my personal view. Another view that a lot of, as lawyers, that we feel is that the principle of audi alterum partem is a principle of natural justice, and the registration of FIR, the mandatory registration of FIR, is somewhat contradictory to that principle of natural justice, because you are, since I'm a defense lawyer, I think I think more for the accused. You're basically the person is put behind bars because he's accused of something. He's prosecuted, of course. He does get his say later during the trial. But if first and foremost, he's put behind bars without being heard. Now, the abuse of process of law is something we all know of. And that is why a lot of other provisions of law do give us that protection, like anticipatory bails and quashing of FIR under Section 482 CRPC, which gives unbridled power to the High Court if there is an abuse of process of law. So yes, the accused do have those safeguards against malicious prosecution. But malicious prosecution and abuse of process of law is rampant in our society, and that is something that our judicial system really needs to look at. And as a personal view of mine, I would not say of the panel, but as a personal view of mine, the judicial system in this regard at least needs a major overhaul. I'll conclude with that, and I hope this was informative for all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful words. Now I'd request Garima, our organizing member, to propose a vote of thanks to the honorable dignitary.
Honorable Mr. Justice P.N. Narayana sir, Advocate Amarjeet Kaur ma'am, Advocate Sapan Dheer sir, Advocate Lavneet Kaur Dhaliwal ma'am, and Dr. Monica Sharma ma'am. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this wonderful fulfillment of virtual session 8.0. I, Garima, on behalf of entire Rayat College of Law, extend a hearty vote of thanks to all our dignitaries who blessed us with their presence and took out their valuable time. I also wish a gratitude towards our worthy principal, Dr. Monica Sharma ma'am, who allowed us with such a platform and gave us opportunity to organize such a great session. I must mention a special thanks to our dignitaries for accepting our invitation and for enlightening this session with their presence. A very special thanks to our knowledge partners, the Locket, the Legal Insider, Lawledge, and Law Traction. Thank you to all the participants for being such a patient listeners. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. As no program can become successful by a single person, I would extend a hearty thanks to our organizing team comprising of Saksham, Pratibha, and Mannat for their constant support and help in organizing this webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Now I seek the permission of the esteemed panel to close the webinar. With the all due permission of the guest of honor, Sapan Dheer sir, Advocate Amarjeet Kaur Khurana ma'am, Lavleen Dhali ma'am, can I close the webinar?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Bye-bye.
Bye.